May 13, 1944, Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, Pearl Harbor. In a quiet operations room, the sound of pencils scratching filled the air as codebreakers translated intercepted Japanese signals into English. One message stood out. It came from submarine I-16. It mentioned a scheduled rice delivery to Bin, southern Bougainville, and that departure was imminent. Lieutenant Commander Robert Williamson paused mid-sip, set down his coffee, and picked up the secure line. 3 destroyer escorts were ordered to intercept: the USS England, the USS George, and the USS Raby. None of them knew that this single decoded message would lead to one of the most successful anti-submarine campaigns in naval history. During the Pacific War, U.S. forces had learned that Japanese submarines weren't just offensive weapons, they were supply lines. Cutting them off meant starving out entire garrisons. The Imperial Japanese Navy's 7th Submarine Squadron had set up a patrol chain stretching from Truk Island to the Admiralty Islands. 7 submarines, I-16, RO-104, RO-105, RO-106, RO-108, RO-116, and RO-117, formed Admiral Somu Toyoda's underwater sentries. Their mission: detect any American fleet movement toward the Palau or Mariana Islands. The USS England sliced through Pacific swells at 23 knots. Her Buckley-class hull displaced 1,400 tons of seawater. On the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton studied the tactical chart. The ship carried 186 crewmen and an arsenal built for one purpose: to destroy submarines. She had 2 depth charge racks, 8 K-guns that could hurl 300-pound charges 150 yards, and her most revolutionary weapon mounted forward of the bridge: the 24-barrel Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar. This weapon, designed in Britain, was deadly and efficient. Unlike depth charges that exploded at preset depths, Hedgehog projectiles only detonated on contact. Each of its 24 barrels launched a 65-pound shell containing 35 pounds of Torpex explosive. The numbers spoke for themselves. Traditional depth charges achieved 1 hit for every 80 attacks, while the Hedgehog scored 1 in 5. Executive Officer John Williamson, a Cambridge graduate with a sharp mind for trigonometry and physics, had studied those figures closely. To him, submarine warfare was all about geometry: sound waves moving through water at 4,800 feet per second, attack angles, and split-second calculations. 1 fraction of a degree could mean the difference between a hit and a miss. Aboard the Japanese submarine I-16, Lieutenant Commander Taiuchi Yoshitaka reviewed his manifest: 75 rubber bags filled with rice. 9 previous patrols had taught him that supply runs were some of the most dangerous missions in the Imperial Navy. On the surface, ships risked air attack. Underwater, they risked sonar detection. I-16 displaced 2,180 tons submerged, driven by diesel engines above water and electric motors below. Her 94-man crew had survived numerous attacks, but one weakness remained: she had to surface periodically to recharge batteries and replenish air. As the American destroyers neared the intercept zone, they formed a line abreast search formation: USS George to port, USS Raby to starboard, and USS England in the center. Each ship swept the sea with SG radar and QC sonar. The sonar teams worked in 15-minute shifts, trained to tell the difference between whale songs, schools of fish, and the metallic echo of a submarine's hull. Sonarman First Class David Chun had spent 18 months tracking enemy contacts across the Pacific. His hands moved instinctively over the controls: rotate the transducer, stop every few degrees, send out a ping, listen for the echo. The ocean was calm that day, ideal for sound travel. No temperature layers distorted the sonar. At 13:35 on May 19, Chun's headphones came alive with the unmistakable ping of a submarine echo, range 2,000 yards, bearing 090 degree. He hit the alarm and called the bridge. Sonar contact, bearing 090, range 2,000 yards. On I-16's bridge, the hydrophone operator had also heard the American sonar. Lieutenant Commander Yoshitaka ordered an emergency dive. Valves hissed as compressed air vented, the submarine tilting down as seawater rushed into ballast tanks. She reached periscope depth in 45 seconds, and 100 feet in just over 2 minutes. Aboard the England, Williamson plotted the attack. Estimated target speed, 8 knots, heading southwest toward Bougainville. Depth, likely 100 to 200 feet. The Hedgehog's effective range was 270 yards, but accuracy depended on perfect timing and depth prediction. At 1341, the first Hedgehog attack began. 24 projectiles arced into the air, falling in a precise 40-yard spread. They hit the water, sank. No explosions. A miss. Williamson recalculated. The submarine was deeper than expected, likely hiding below a thermal layer at 150 feet. He adjusted the course and fired again. At 1358, the second salvo scored a hit. A muffled explosion rippled through the sea. The submarine was damaged but still moving. Through sonar, Williamson could hear grinding machinery. I-16 was wounded but not finished. The third attack at 1410 failed. Williamson had estimated 200 feet, but readings showed the sub at 325 feet. The Hedgehog rounds had passed harmlessly above. Yoshitaka proved skilled, using depth changes and maneuvers to escape. The fourth attack also missed as I-16 executed a sharp turn. The Japanese hydrophone team had learned to count the timing between sonar pings, predicting when the Americans would fire. They shifted depth by 50 feet and turned hard to port, textbook evasion tactics. At 1433, Williamson made his final calculation, bearing 170 degrees, range 400 yards, depth 250 feet. He fired. The fifth Hedgehog attack struck home. 4 to 6 projectiles hit I-16's pressure hull. The explosion lifted the England's stern from the sea, knocking sailors off their feet. Inside I-16, seawater burst through ruptured hull plates. Lights failed. The bow pitched downward as the sub began its fatal dive to the ocean floor, nearly 3 miles below. 20 minutes later, debris surfaced, oil slicks, planking, and life preservers marked with Japanese characters. I-16 and her 94 crewmen were gone. But the battle wasn't over. Fleet Radio Unit Pacific had cracked more than one message. On May 20th, codebreakers intercepted another Japanese transmission, revealing the entire patrol line of the 7th Submarine Squadron. 7 submarines positioned along a route that Admiral William Halsey had used before to move the Third Fleet. Among them, RO-104, RO-105, RO-106, and RO-108. The hunt was far from finished. RO-109, RO-112, and RO-116. Admiral Toyoda's strategy was tactically sound. Position submarines at critical choke points where American carrier task forces were most exposed. The goal was simple: force the enemy to either endure submarine attacks or divert around the patrol line, costing them valuable time. The plan assumed that U.S. anti-submarine forces might detect individual submarines but couldn't eliminate an entire squadron before it could reposition. Commander Hamilton Haines, leading Escort Division 39, was ordered to sweep the Japanese patrol line from west to east. His force, 3 destroyer escorts, faced 7 enemy submarines. On paper, the odds favored the Japanese. But the calculations didn't consider American technological superiority and the precision of the USS England's Hedgehog weapon system. At 3:50 on May 22, USS George detected RO-106 by radar, spotting the surfaced submarine about 8 miles away. The Japanese crew had surfaced to recharge batteries, a necessary but risky move that made them visible. A searchlight confirmed the contact as George's 5-inch guns swung into position. RO-106 crash-dived within 38 seconds, but the damage was already done. The Americans now knew its approximate position and direction. At 4:15, USS George launched a Hedgehog attack, but missed as the submarine maneuvered at 200 feet. Hydrophone operators aboard RO-106 had picked up the attack and responded quickly. By 4:25, USS England regained sonar contact. Lieutenant Commander Williamson refined his targeting method using data from a previous engagement with the I-16. He calculated depth based on sonar time, adjusted for evasion speed and turning radius, then predicted the submarine's position a minute after contact. His first Hedgehog volley missed, but the second at 5:01 scored at least 3 direct hits. A massive explosion erupted from below, sending a column of water and debris into the air. RO-106's hull was ruptured in multiple areas, and its ballast systems failed. The submarine sank stern first, taking all 59 crew members with it. 2 submarines destroyed in 4 days. Japanese naval intelligence quickly recognized a pattern. American anti-submarine forces were methodically hunting the 7th Submarine Squadron using new tactics and weapons. Orders went out for all remaining subs to maintain radio silence and avoid surfacing unless absolutely necessary. But the Americans had momentum and technology the Japanese couldn't match. Their radar detected submarines beyond 10 miles. Their sonar could track targets through thermal layers and strong currents. And the Hedgehog system solved the weaknesses of depth charges. Traditional depth charges required ships to pass over the target, temporarily losing sonar contact. This gap gave submarines time to evade. Additionally, the explosions created turbulence and noise that blocked sonar readings for up to 15 minutes. Hedgehogs fired ahead of the ship while maintaining contact. Missed attacks caused no interference, allowing immediate follow-ups. The contact-fused warheads only exploded on impact, removing guesswork and false readings. RO-104 became the next target. At 6:10 on May 23, USS Raby spotted it on radar while it was surfaced about 250 nautical miles northwest of New Ireland. The sub's radar warning system worked, and it submerged within 45 seconds, but that was long enough for the Americans to calculate its course, speed, and dive point. Between 6:17 and 7:15, Raby launched 4 Hedgehog attacks, all misses, as RO-104 used every trick possible to evade. The Japanese crew tried to jam sonar, made random course changes, varied depth between 50 and 300 feet, and released compressed air to create false echoes. 3 years of Pacific warfare had taught them every tactic for survival. USS George joined at 7:17, adding 5 more unsuccessful attacks. The submarine commander used ocean currents and temperature layers to hide his position, operating silently and adjusting depth through ballast changes rather than propellers. At 8:19, Executive Officer Williamson prepared his final firing solution. After 2 hours of evasion, RO-104 was running low on power and air. It would have to reduce its movements to conserve energy. Williamson predicted its next position and ordered the attack. At 8:34, 24 Hedgehog rounds bracketed the target, achieving 10 to 12 direct hits. Flooding followed, triggering automatic ballast release. 3 minutes later, a massive underwater explosion tore the submarine apart. Oil and debris surfaced at 10:45. All 58 crew members perished. 3 submarines destroyed in 5 days, an outcome previously considered impossible. Traditional depth charges had success rates near 3% in 1942, rising to 30% by war's end. The Hedgehog's 20% hit rate represented a 6-fold improvement, but the psychological effect was even greater. Japanese crews began requesting withdrawal from patrol zones, fearing what they called American superweapons. RO-116 was next. On May 24 at 1:20, USS George detected it by radar 8 miles away, moving at 12 knots. Its commander chose speed over stealth, a fatal decision. At 1:50, England gained sonar contact as the sub crash-dived in 35 seconds. Williamson adjusted his targeting strategy using data from earlier fights. At 2:14, the first Hedgehog barrage struck home, 3 to 5 direct hits. This time, there was no secondary explosion. Though the newer Japanese submarines had improved damage control, they couldn't survive multiple hull breaches below the waterline. Sonar recorded the breaking of internal bulkheads, ballast venting, and engine room flooding until the submarine vanished. All 56 crew were lost. 4 submarines in 6 days. USS England's record-breaking success drew high-level attention. Admiral Chester Nimitz requested detailed reports on its tactics and weapon performance. Admiral Ernest King began planning upgrades for other destroyer escorts. But the mission wasn't over. 3 enemy submarines were still active, and Japanese command finally grasped the scale of the disaster. Orders went out for the surviving subs to regroup and defend each other. On May 26, a new hunter-killer group, led by the escort carrier USS Hoggett Bay and 4 Fletcher-class destroyers, arrived to relieve England, George, and Raby. The 3 destroyer escorts had been in non-stop combat for 8 days and needed fuel and ammunition. Standard orders called for a return to port, but Commander Haynes asked for permission to make one final sweep while en route to Manus for resupply. Intelligence reports indicated RO-108 was nearby, likely attempting to rendezvous with the remaining subs. At 23:04 on May 26, USS England made sonar contact at 1,500 yards. The target was moving at 8 knots. Another hunt was about to begin. The submarine maintained a southeasterly course, moving underwater at a shallow depth. This approach allowed it to balance speed with minimal battery use, extending its operational range. Lieutenant Williamson completed his attack calculations within 3 minutes of first contact. The target's depth was estimated at 120 feet, based on sonar readings. Its steady course suggested the submarine's commander was either unaware of American pursuit or was trying to outrun detection rather than take evasive action. At 23:23, the USS England launched a Hedgehog attack that struck multiple times against RO-108's hull. The submarine's destruction was immediate and complete, marked by a massive underwater explosion that briefly lit the ocean surface with phosphorescent bubbles and debris. Lights from its battery compartments glowed faintly underwater for several minutes before fading completely. In just 8 days, 5 submarines had been destroyed. The USS England had achieved the most successful anti-submarine patrol in naval history. Yet one final target remained, RO-105, commanded by Lieutenant Junichi Inouye, with Captain Ryan Suko, leader of Submarine Division 51, aboard as a passenger. Built at the Sasebo Naval Arsenal and commissioned in November 1943, RO-105 had already survived multiple encounters with American forces. On August 12, 1943, it narrowly evaded 2 torpedoes fired by USS Tarpon through skillful maneuvering. A month later, it launched torpedoes at the light cruiser USS Columbia, missing only because of the target's evasive action. The submarine also carried out rescue missions, recovering downed Japanese pilots near the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. With an experienced crew and a skilled commander, RO-105 was considered the most dangerous remaining submarine in the 7th Squadron. Japanese 6th Fleet intelligence had intercepted U.S. communications, revealing the general location of the USS England and its accompanying ships. Orders were sent for RO-105 to avoid American forces and return to Truk for rearming and crew rotation. But limited fuel and battery capacity made this impossible without surfacing in areas patrolled by U.S. aircraft. The final battle began on May 29, when the USS George detected RO-105 running on the surface at 21:30. The submarine crash-dived immediately, but its position and course were now known. What followed was a 25-hour battle of endurance that pushed both sides to their limits. Throughout the night, USS George launched multiple Hedgehog attacks but missed as RO-105 changed course and depth constantly, every 3 minutes. It varied depth between 60 and 300 feet, maintained silent running at low speed, and used bursts of compressed air to create false sonar echoes. By dawn on May 30, both USS George and USS Raby had exhausted most of their Hedgehog ammunition without success. RO-105's commander had demonstrated remarkable skill, using every tactic available, adjusting ballast tanks to shift trim, precisely controlling speed to prevent propeller noise, and deploying acoustic decoys at key moments. Commander Haynes had initially kept the USS England in reserve, following doctrine that protected the most successful ship from unnecessary risk. But after 24 hours of failed attacks, he gave the order that would secure history. "Oh hell, go ahead England," came the transmission at 7:36 on May 30. Executive Officer Williamson had been tracking the battle, analyzing evasion patterns, and computing optimal attack parameters. He estimated the target depth at about 200 feet, with a southwest course toward Bougainville. RO-105 had slowed to conserve battery power. At 7:36, the England launched another Hedgehog attack, scoring 6 to 10 direct hits. At 7:41, a massive explosion followed as the submarine's air systems ruptured, flooding every compartment. Oil and debris soon surfaced, confirming RO-105's destruction. Among the 55 lost was Captain Ryan Suko, one of Japan's most experienced submarine leaders. His death represented not just a personal loss, but the collapse of years of institutional naval expertise. In 12 days, 6 submarines were destroyed, an unmatched achievement in anti-submarine warfare. Admiral Ernest King later fulfilled his promise that there will always be an England in the U.S. Navy, when a new guided missile destroyer bearing the same name was commissioned in 1960. The implications went far beyond a single ship's success. The destruction of Japan's 7th Submarine Squadron marked a turning point in the Pacific War. Admiral Toyoda's planned Operation A-Go, which relied on submarine reconnaissance, was compromised before it began. Without undersea scouting, Japanese intelligence operated effectively blind. The technological lessons were equally important. Between December 1941 and September 1945, the U.S. produced over 622,000 depth charges, a massive investment in conventional anti-submarine weapons. Yet, the Hedgehog proved far superior, prioritizing precision over quantity. British data from World War II showed that one submarine was sunk for every 60 depth charge attacks, while the Hedgehog achieved 1 kill for every 6, 10 times more effective. Combined with advances in sonar and radar, it revolutionized anti-submarine warfare. The psychological impact on Japanese crews was severe. Once confident in their ability to evade detection, they now faced weapons of alarming accuracy. Intercepted morale reports showed increasing reluctance to engage American ships. Admiral Toyoda quickly adjusted Operation A-Go, removing submarine reconnaissance from the plan. Surface ships and aircraft were reassigned for scouting, but these resources were already stretched thin as Japan entered the war's final phase. The England's success also underscored the growing role of signals intelligence. Codebreakers at Fleet Radio Unit Pacific had intercepted Japanese messages, providing critical information about submarine movements and supply missions. Without that intelligence, Locating the submarines in the vast Pacific would have been nearly impossible. Williamson's mathematical approach to attack planning marked another leap forward. His calculations of target depth, course, and speed, based on sonar data and evasion analysis, transformed submarine hunting from instinct-driven to scientific. After the war, his methods were widely adopted, improving the Pacific Fleet's overall effectiveness. The human cost was heavy. Around 400 Japanese submariners perished during those 12 days, a devastating loss of trained specialists. Each submarine crew represented months of training and years of experience. In contrast, not a single American sailor aboard the USS England, George, or Raby was killed or injured during the campaign. This stark imbalance reflected not only superior technology, but also better leadership, training, and coordination. The broader consequences for Japan's submarine arm were catastrophic. The Imperial Navy began the war with 63 operational submarines. By May 1944, fewer than 30 remained. Losing 7 more within 12 days was unsustainable. Japanese shipyards produced roughly 1 new submarine per month, far slower than the American kill rate. The math was clear: Japan's undersea fleet would be destroyed long before it could threaten U.S. naval power. Technological gaps sealed this fate. American radar could detect surfaced submarines from over 15 miles away, while Japanese boats had to surface regularly to recharge batteries, exposing themselves to attack. New sonar systems on ships like the USS England allowed continuous tracking, even during attack runs. The Hedgehog's contact-fused design was the result of 3 years of weapon development. Unlike depth charges, which detonated at preset depths and disrupted sonar contact, Hedgehog rounds exploded only upon impact, allowing immediate follow-up strikes. U.S. industrial capacity underpinned this success. By war's end, America had produced more than 600,000 depth charges and thousands of Hedgehog launchers, alongside advanced fire control systems. This vast manufacturing effort reflected strategic awareness that anti-submarine warfare would be crucial to victory. Training programs produced thousands of skilled sonar and ASW operators. Knowledge gained in the Atlantic was quickly transferred to Pacific units, creating an ever-widening advantage. The USS England's record symbolized the convergence of technology, intelligence, tactical precision, and industrial might. By June 1944, Japan's submarine operations were reduced to supply runs and isolated patrols. The offensive potential that had once made them a formidable threat was gone. The England continued to serve for the rest of the war, but never again achieved the same level of concentrated success. Its name became synonymous with anti-submarine mastery, representing the shift from traditional naval combat to one driven by data, sensors, and superior engineering. Every major navy studied the England's methods after the war, adapting similar technologies and doctrines. The age of the unseen underwater hunter was over. Submarines now faced advanced detection and destruction systems that rendered stealth increasingly ineffective. Operation Ego proceeded without submarine reconnaissance, contributing to Japan's devastating loss at the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. Freed from submarine threats, American carrier groups operated with unmatched mobility across the Central Pacific. Williamson's analytical approach came to symbolize a new era in warfare, one where scientific calculation replaced intuition as the key to victory. The USS England had not only sunk 6 submarines, it had proven that modern warfare belonged to those with superior technology, training, and production power. 7 Japanese submarines now rest on the ocean floor, their crews remembered for their bravery against overwhelming odds. Their loss marked the end of an era when skill alone could offset technical inferiority. The future of naval combat belonged to those who mastered both science and strategy.